First part. Storytelling through students' ears and words. During these 2 years of ASE Project, many students from France, Italy, Greece, Poland and Romania had the opportunity to travel to these 5 countries, visit the participating schools, the closer towns and be hosted by local families. This is the storytelling of this experience through the recordings they chose to do and through their words answering to the relevant questionnaires. While the first mobility to Greece took place, students from the other 4 countries were invited to record the sounds they believe that can determine the place that they visit. The product recordings are very interesting, especially related to the idea that Greek students have about their place. This idea has become known to us through the answers they gave to a questionnaire that they filled after returning from every mobility. The given questions were 3. I describe and compare the soundscapes of my school and of the school I visited, my home and the one that hosted me, Heraklion town and the town I visited. Both Greek and foreign students agree that the music school of Heraklion is a noisy school, where people are loud. As K.E. says, this doesn't make them noisy, but pleasant schools, full of life. And K.K. adds that laughing voices are heard all the time. Many students, among whom M.P., mentioned the fact that the music school has an intense but pleasant musical timbre, which makes the school's soundscape more beautiful. And E.S. adds, also in my school here in Greece, during the intermissions, usually many kids play music, and this is a fact that relaxes you from lessons stress. Which means that they notice the difference between their school and the others, due to the fact that music is heard all the time and everywhere in their own school, and they describe it as something relaxing and pleasant, but not as extra noise. Although Greek students find Heraklion soundscape tireless, angry, but also familiar and pleasant, and foreign students seem to agree with that through their recordings, guest students have added an important sign of this soundscape, which is the sea. In the second mobility to France, students faced a very different school soundscape. KK describes it as foreigner. The lesson was extremely quiet, without being calm or soothing. Trying to explain why the sound was like that, KK continues. During the intermissions, the sound was stressful, as the place, although it was big, had a strange echo. BM adds that although we are a music school, sometimes they make a lot of noise. But MS doesn't agree totally, mentioning that kids didn't scream there during their breaks. The impression they took from the homes that hosted them was completely the opposite. NM describes: the soundscape of the house, as that of the whole village, was quiet, calm, peaceful, pleasant, relaxing, as a faraway village in Crete would be. Trying to compare the two soundscapes, KK says, the sound was peaceful and beautiful. A few barkings could be heard far away. The same impression they got from the town of Orleans that they visited. MS says, you could listen to the music of the town, you could listen to the birds, and time passed pleasantly like that. And NM adds, in Orleans, cars are less than in Heraklion, because there is the tram. This makes the town much more quiet.
À côté de Madeleine. Oh la Banque de France. Viens, on va nourrir. C'est sûr, on va attendre, on va attendre à côté de Madeleine.
The truth is that through their answers, students look like they are focused on the size of the two towns they had to compare, and they found that size and noise are proportional amounts. Even if they don't mention the sound of the sea in their own town, they are found to be very careful in front of much smoother sounds abroad, like birds singing, breeze between tree leaves, etc. They are probably used to hear their familiar place, but they pay much more attention in a new and unknown one. In the beginning of the second year of ASE Project, Another 6 students traveled to Poland. Through their answers, they found their school and the Polish one are rather similar. SR says, during the intermissions there is confusion, but during the lessons there is total silence.
Ah, j'avoue pas. J'adore faire ça avec un autre. Non mais bon. Let's wait.
And MP agrees that the soundscape there is extremely quiet, with simple discussions between kids.
No tak, ale chcielibyśmy tutaj nie. To moje zobowiązanie, jeżeli ja dałam te pieniądze na te co to jest? Należności, teraz należności jakie? Oczywiście, ale jakie to należności byłyby?
To add with some humor, and a malformed, bad-tuned bell. The main difference students realized was the fact that the homes they were hosted in and the general landscape was not a town but a village, thinly populated. Though, describing their guests' homes, T.S. says, "The house where I was hosted was a quiet, big apartment in a peaceful building as it was in a village." Like S.R., who says, "The house where I was hosted was surrounded by a farm and fields of corn probably, so it was very quiet, in contrast with my house, which is in the town." They also look like having the same impression from the wider landscape there, mentioning the frequent parks all around. S.R. again says, "There were many more parks." It's obvious that all students appreciate positively the sounds of nature instead of the urban ones, and some of them express the desire to have more of that in their everyday life. After the third mobility in Romania, the impression that students brought back from the school through the recordings is rather different than the one they describe in words. Both NL and NA have the same opinion, talking about the soundscape of the Romanian school. NL says that during the intermission it was deafening, intense, tiring, noisy, and NA adds, the soundscape of my school is quiet and peaceful, but the one of Crayova's school was irritating. But apart from the way they received it, both their recordings sound much more quiet than those from the Greek school. Only GC found it peaceful, mentioning that you could also listen to the wind and the singing birds. Generally, we can come to the conclusion that students feel safe and comfortable into their own school, home, or town environment, so they describe even the most noisy soundscapes as pleasant and vivid. On the contrary, their general impression from homes was that they had a pleasant and relaxing atmosphere, as J.M. said. E.C. additionally made a reference on the music that was heard non-stop in the house he was hosted. The students found the soundscape of Craiova similarly noisy with the one coming from Heraclio. G.M. explains, the sounds from the town of Craiova were a little bit more deafening than those from the town of Heraclio. However, they are both round the same level of noise. Although no one mentioned any significant difference, G.M. recorded a sound that you cannot find in Heraclion anymore. It was the sound of a horse passing through a street. The last mobility was in Italy. On the contrary of all the previous visited schools, the students who visited this one brought back the impression that it was loud as their own. M.K. describes, in the classroom where I attended lessons in Italy, there was more fuss than in my classroom at school. M.V. brought back an adapted recording taken during a lesson. And ES brought one more, recorded during the lunch break. We can't avoid the fact that students travel abroad, having already an impression about the culture they are going to visit. In such cases, it's even easier for them to relate an attitude they meet there with the mentality of people that they already know. More specifically, different students coming back from Italy describe homes are vivid and happy. MK says, "My house is usually very quiet, but in the house I was hosted, we couldn't stop laughing because of the jokes that the father of the family was making. Generally, there was too much liveliness." At the same time, ES records from the house she was hosted. This storytelling is completed with the way students describe the towns they visited in Italy, which was one more time related to the population and the size of them. MK says, "Siena is a town with more population than Iraklio. However, the place there is peaceful and pleasant." Gathering all the previous elements and capturing the upper conclusions, we can come to the final conclusion that the whole procedure gave to every student the chance to obtain the ability of watching critically and create full descriptions of places using only oral elements and not any visual ones. It taught them respect to the value of nature and culture, as well as to the value of diversity. As an educational tool, it can offer to those who use it critical thought, creativity, and a valuable framework for the constructivist educational pedagogy that supports student-centered learning through their own experiences. Visualization comparison. Working on soundscapes diversity and trying to identify quantitative and qualitative differences among them, a spectrum of the recordings can be a very useful tool. The recordings are grouped like that. First come those from the schools, in chronological order. The mobility to Greece was the first one, then to France, the third one to Poland, the fourth to Romania, and the last one to Italy. They are followed by the recordings made in the hosting homes, and in the end by those made in the towns students visited. The chronological order is of course always the same. Equal durations, 10 seconds, of one typical recording per place and per country makes the research easier and more clear.
J'ai mal là. Non mais tu vois tout à l'heure elle t'a vu dans mon truc et il y a la lettre qui m'a fait moi t'es dit ça tu fais les toilettes.
Conclusions. Through this spectrum analysis, we can come to a number of conclusions, as we did during the storytelling. Specifically, places not only seem visually different, but they are orally different too. These differences are related to the natural landscape, the human constructions, and to the culture, attitudes, habits, behavior, etc., of the people who use it. Students are able to focus on nature and urban sounds, as well as to choose which of them can give the impression of a specific place. So, a procedure like this can offer to students, and not only, the ability to identify critically their material and create knowledge interpreting their own individual perspective, They can find through it their personalized meaning-making. Special thanks to Dr. Audio Mr. Renato Bartolini for his priceless and very specialized help. End of first part.